Stories have the power to transport you into another world, inspire and even transform lives. Today on Books with Bridgetti, you'll discover how one woman defied the odds of dyslexia to become an award-winning author. We're diving into Steffanie Costigan's fascinating world of The Land of the Dragon, where history meets fantasy in an unforgettable adventure. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story, discover how authors breathe life into characters, and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us only on Books with Bridgetti.
If you've just joined us, then welcome to Books with Bridgetti. Our live stream is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. In today's show, we're going to be talking to Steffanie Costigan, authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Now, a little bit of background if you've not met Steffanie before. Steffanie Costigan is an award-winning author with a passion for historic fantasy. And despite her struggle with dyslexia, Steffanie has penned the novel Land of the Dragon, an award-winning historic fantasy filled with rich symbolism. Steffanie also authored the children's book called Stony Gaze. She holds a diploma in creative writing and digital communication and continues to develop her writing while balancing her career as a journalist. So let's give her a warm welcome to the show, shall we? Steffanie, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you on the show and to talk about your book. And for me, this is a big deal. You're a journalist, you're an author with dyslexia, and I'm going to jump right in. How has dyslexia shaped your approach to storytelling in ways that other writers may not expect?
Oh boy. Well, dyslexia has wow. Honestly, it's hard because I have such a passion for writing, but it's my weakness at the same time because of my dyslexia. So I have to use I guess extra tools to help me with my writing process.
And how long did it take you to figure out what works for you? And I'm asking this because there are lots of people out there with dyslexia and feel that they can't ever become an author or a journalist, and yet you've done it. You're an award-winning author. How long did it take you to figure out something that works for you?
A lot of failures. That's how I learned. A lot of stumbling blocks and a lot of perseverance, just pushing through, and trying different things out. Really, you never know until you try, and if one way doesn't work, then try a different way.
So perseverance is definitely your strong suit. So when you started Land of the Dragon, your beautiful book there, at the age of 12, did you imagine the story to evolve the way it has today?
Honestly, being a young girl, I always had big, big dreams for Land of the Dragon. And I took my time with writing it because I wanted to make sure that it was at a level of development that I could be proud of no matter what, you know? And it took me a long time. It took me over 20 years, but it was worth it because I had a standard and I wasn't going to lower that standard for anything of how I wanted my book to be. So yeah, a lot of tears, a lot of people doubting, but I just pushed through it because it meant a lot to me.
I think your passion shines through in the fact that you're now, and not just an author, but you're an award-winning author. So well done for persevering and pushing through what was hugely uncomfortable, I'm sure. Now, World War II is often portrayed through specific lenses over the years. What unique perspective did you aim to bring through Eleanor's journey?
So, I've noticed a lot of World War II has been presented in many different ways, but it's never really been explored through the lens of a female in Nazi Germany at that time. Um, so that's what I wanted to explore because we've always heard a lot of the organizations from a man's perspective, but not as much explored through a woman's perspective and the organizations that the women were forced to be in. Like we know about the Hitler Youth, but not many people know that there was the League of German Girls, which was also mandatory for girls to attend.
Well, I've just learned something new. I didn't know that myself.
There was a lot of research put into this book and a lot of information that we're not taught. And I think it's very important to bring it to light because how can we avoid repeating pasts if we don't even know our past?
And that's a very important point. We have to connect with our past to understand where we are and where we are going. Can you talk a little bit about the symbolism of dragons in your book and how that relates to some of the historical truths?
Yeah, so what I did is with Land of the Dragon, yes, it when you first read it, you wouldn't believe it goes into fantasy because it's all taking place in the setting of the 1940s in Germany. Uh, and through the eyes of Eleanor. And eventually, certain events happen without ruining the book that makes them have to flee. And in the process of fleeing, uh, tragedy kind of strikes, and then they end up kind of like Narnia. A transition happens, and they end up in this new world, this magical place, and where the people there can turn into dragons. Um, and it's just showing that it doesn't matter where you go. Um, if a nation forgets its identity or its roots, it can be easily manipulated or uprooted.
Very interesting point. Very interesting point. How do you think historical fantasy allows you to blend facts with fiction in ways that pure historical or fantasy fiction couldn't do?
Because I think honestly, there's truths I'm trying to point out. The reason I'm blending it is like it doesn't matter where you are or what modern day you are, because people say, oh, that was back then. We can't repeat those mistakes. But that's, I think, naive to say. Um, and that's why I have those facts in with the fantasy, because it doesn't matter. What really matters is the pattern. I'm trying to reflect, I guess, in the novel the patterns of why things transpired the way they did during World War II and relate it to a fantasy side of things as well. How there's certain patterns, and if we don't recognize those patterns, then we're doomed to similar fate.
That totally makes sense, yes. And Bianca has got a question for you. She says, would you say it's historically inspired drama transitioning into fantasy?
That's a good phrase. Yeah, no, I'd say it is. It's like it starts out in the modern time, well, modern our world, not modern, but 1940s, and it transpires into this fantasy world, and it is very dramatic, but it has so much symbolism and so much hidden facts layered throughout it. Um, that does make it kind of dramatic, you could say.
Absolutely. Now, you started very young, as we mentioned earlier. How do you think your earlier experiences with your German neighbors influenced the tone of Land of the Dragon?
Oh, very much. They really inspired me. So, growing up, I lived next door, as you mentioned, to uh, my neighbors who were immigrants from Germany, and they lived as youth during World War II. And actually, the man even served as a Nazi at one point, and I think even a Gestapo over time. But he he shared a lot of stories with me, a lot of real stories of what he experienced and what he saw, and it was quite horrifying, honestly. But it really piqued my curiosity as a child because I thought, like, it was kind of crazy to me that something like this could happen, if that makes sense.
And what an amazing opportunity to have had to be able to get a first-hand account from someone who was actually there. I think not many of us have had that opportunity or will ever get that opportunity. So that was amazing. And for you to absorb all that information as a child, I'm sure must have been quite a lot.
It definitely piqued my interest. But and I started interviewing more older folks that have since passed, but there was so much information and facts that I received from them. It was crazy. Like, there was so much we weren't taught in school that I thought, this is actually quite valuable information. If we're not gathering these information, we're gonna lose it.
Absolutely. So what are some of the lessons that you hope hope readers and especially younger readers would take from Eleanor's defiance and search for truth?
Well, I hope people like don't just come to a conclusion or follow a group, right? There's a lot of group polarization. And I hope people do their research and think as an individual and think for themselves and have the courage to stand up for the truth. Um, because, and sometimes reality, I believe people paint it from their emotions, and it's not actually the reality. Sometimes, our world is built on our emotions, the reality, but there's more to it. And if we're brave enough to step out of that, we can see more of the pieces come together of how things are and just patterns, and it can help us better our lives, honestly. um, because it puts more of a perspective together and less thinking in just one group or category. We can think with all the pieces if we're open to it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Now, you're a mom of four.
Mhm.
Do you think that being a mother influences your characters and relationships in your books?
Um, I think it develops it more, like, because I was working on Land of the Dragon at such a young age, a lot of the character development was kind of already done, but it did having that experience with children did strengthen it more. The book definitely matured with me as I grew older and kept working on it. Um, but yeah, I think it does influence. You definitely get to be more in touch with emotional sides and how uh, value more of people, if that makes sense, of who people are. You can see a little clearer, um, just from raising children. You can see, I think people have more worth. I don't know how to fully explain that, but you grow more love because you
I
understand.
Yeah, I totally get that. Now, on the other side of that spectrum, your experience as a journalist brings a different writing style to what someone who's not a journalist has. How would you say journalism has informed or impacted your fiction writing?
I think it has helped actually. Journalism is a different style of writing, very different. It's very, very simple. It's a summary. It's like you're writing everything as a summary. You're not putting any emotion in reporting should come from the testimonies you get, from the statements. That's where any emotion in the story comes from, not from you or for your point of view. Your point of view should never ever be in a piece unless it's a point of view piece, right? But it helped me with Land of the Dragon just because I put so much detail in Land of the Dragon, and a lot actually from the editor was cut out because it was just too much, right? So it helped me simplify um, things, like put more of a balance.
Talking about balance, you had to weave history and fantasy together, and I'm sure there must have been some challenges. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I mean, there as you know, history holds a lot, and some things very deep, or uh, things that are morally hard hard to deal with. So it was finding the right balance to introduce those things in a somewhat safe environment, but at the same time not letting the fantasy uh, kind of ruin the facts of the reality, if that makes sense. Because I put a lot of Easter eggs throughout the book, a lot of heroes that tried to defy or tried to stand up against what was being taught back then, and um, they were, they suffered consequence for it. So I have a lot of Easter eggs with that. Some names, even like some names are combined with real life people names, right? Like people that stood up. Like I know, I'll mention the Huguenot group. The Huguenot group is someone I really honor within my book, and even shared a little piece of their article that Eleanor comes across, and it's the actual article they wrote, um, kind of against what was being taught in Germany at that time. And the Huguenot group, a lot of people don't know about the Huguenot group. They were three young boys that were writers, and they were making a big impact with their writing against this propaganda that was being enforced. So I contribute a lot about them throughout my book.
Wow, well done on doing that. But staying with balance just for another minute,
Mhm.
how do you balance the darkness of war with the fantasy elements um, in Land of the Dragon?
I think it's just like real life in a sense where, um, you really can't know what real joy is unless you have uh, really faced some pain or darkness. And that's the same. Yes, there's some dark facts of what happened during that time, but I balance it with some lightness of the fantasy and also hope. That's the biggest thing that I want people to feel when they read my book. Like, if anything, what is a real reward to me is not that this novel is award-winning book. What really matters to me is when I hear readers come and say, "You know what? I read this book and I actually felt really inspired, or I felt hope." To me, that's the biggest trophy ever, because that's really the impact or the purpose behind this story, is to help people recognize, yes, we live in a different world, but maybe to help them get out of a mental rut they're in, or we all face different types of challenges or battles, and the fantasy element brings in more of the light, more of the hope. Like, yes, this is happening, but we can still fight it, or we can still be happy. So,
Absolutely. And shout out hello to Gabe. Um, Steffanie, why was it important to you personally to explore the topic of indoctrination in the book?
because I think that, like, for me, the real important thing is history. I think there's somewhere our world really needs history. Like, if you think about it, we're the only creatures in this world that tell stories. No other creature or person or animal or whatever does that. We tell stories. Why do we tell stories? Because our history is really important. It's something we should not forget. Um, and I think that's really what passions my passion and feel behind historic writing, or in this case, historic fantasy, comes from, is in the fantasy twist makes it more fun, engages the youth more too, young adults as well. Like, it lets your imagination have a bit of fun, but with some history behind it.
Now, we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the interview, but as a writer with dyslexia, what advice have you got for others with dyslexia if they're wanting to become an author?
Well, what I think is, like, those who have dyslexia, there's different levels of dyslexia. For me, I had really severe dyslexia, but if you're like me, I think it doesn't matter if writing or reading is a weakness. If you're passionate about it and you have a story you want to get out there, or you want to tell, then no matter what, nothing can stand in your way. You just got to keep working past it and not get discouraged. Find more hope than discouragement during the hard times. There's also a lot of tools out there nowadays. We're lucky that we have that can help combat it, or make it a little easy, a little less harder or intimidating, I should say, to write. And it takes me a lot longer than normal writers, I will admit, but just gotta pushing forward. And
Perseverance for the win, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Steffanie, would you say that any of your personal experiences influenced the development of Eleanor's character at all?
I get that question a lot. Yes and no. I feel like the character Eleanor is more based off of my sister than myself. It's just what I have witnessed and seen through someone experiencing a lot of hardships, that I kind of based Eleanor's character more off of. So it's more of what I've witnessed than what I have experienced firsthand. So it's more of a secondhand kind of experience.
Ah, no, get that. Now, I think you're currently working on more volumes, right?
That's
So
correct.
what are some of the new themes or elements that you plan to introduce into future books? Can you say?
Well, I am currently working on number 2 of Land of the Dragon. I'm hoping by around maybe the end of 2025 or 2026, it will be released. But the theme I could try to kind of is leaning more towards empowerment, you could say, or uh, finding more confidence in someone who's struggling, right? Like if someone has a lot of doubts within themselves, or they're finding more power, you could say, during really hard times within themselves.
Now, I often hear authors of fantasy or fiction say how they allow the character to unfold and kind of guide the story as they go along. Is there a moment in Land of the Dragon that surprised you as you're writing it?
I think there's a lot of moments. There's a lot of emotional moments too. Like Land of the Dragon style of writing is first person perspective. So I really had to emotionally get in deep with the characters because you can't write something that you haven't fully experienced, or at least simulate a little bit more of the experience, right? Especially in first person perspective. And I think that it really helped, like what's the word I'm looking for? It just helped develop it helped the story go along and the character develop with like I use a certain strategy with my characters, right? And with writing. Like I have researched personality tests, and really good accurate one. The one I like is the 16 personality test. And within that test, it's developed by psychiatrists and counselors, and it's really well developed. But I, every one of my characters is in one of those groups that they have studied for different personalities, and that keeps it consistent. Like, because I really don't like it when the character breaks character to move the story from A to B. I feel there's still a way to move a story from A to B without breaking character. You just got to be creative on how you go about it. Um, so I know some people are like, oh, I let the character lead this story. For me, it's yes and no, right? Um, there are things I won't make the character do to break character, but there's still a way the character can go about things and stay within their character and personality and move the story along to where it needs to be, if that makes sense.
No, perfect sense. Can you hold the book up for a minute and then just tell me a little bit about that cover? How did you decide? I'm going to put you on full screen for a second. How
Okay.
did you decide on that cover?
So I roughly designed this, and then I got a designer that's more talented than myself to go over my kind of blueprints, you could say, and make it way nicer. But this image, I believe I designed it back in when I was in high school. I was in art class, and I came up with this idea of the two faces and the kind of, the calm versus the power type of thing. Um, but there was a lot. There's a lot actually happening in this cover, and there's a lot of symbolism, like with the eyes. I'm trying to see it but show at the same time, with the eyes, the marks, even the background little marks, like are symbols. There's reasons for everything that's on the cover. There's a reason for it. And
And I
just
believe the colors are intentional too, right?
That's correct. Yes, the colors are intentional. They symbolize the abilities these two characters have.
Amazing. I really like that cover. And kudos to the designer.
Yeah.
I always think it's so, it's so special when a cover designer is able to translate what you have in your head.
Oh, definitely. And she was brilliant, honestly. I had a lot of cover designers I approached that were really uh shy or scared to take this on because of the skill needed to do this kind of thing, but she was amazing and she was great because whenever I was like, I don't like this, or can you adjust this, she did it. And fun fact about the cover is the people on the cover, I'll show it a little closer. I actually got people to model for them. So the man on the cover here, he's actually my husband. So my husband modeled.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and then this girl is this is gonna be hard to say. It's my husband's cousin's wife. So
Wow. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliantly done. Well done on that job.
thank you. Yeah,
Now I want to switch for a second because you also wrote a children's book,
I did
a,
indeed.
a stony gaze. What gave birth to that idea? And
So a stony gaze I developed, I believe it was in 2021 during the pandemic, you know. I it was actually a school project. It wasn't an intentional like I'm going to write this. It was a school project. I was taking classes at that time for writing for a young adult, teens, and children. And it was assignment to write a children's story. And I get very passionate with my writing, so I'm like, I want it to mean something. It has to be like good, not just, I don't know, mediocre. So, what gave me the idea was actually a combination between my sister and my husband. So, my sister, she's actually has her master's in psychology and she's going in for her doctorates to do play therapy. So she mentioned to me about group polarization. My husband at the time was also studying uh, can't say it, psychology. And he kind of elaborated for me what group polarization was. And I was just fascinated by it because I was like, wow, it's so evident. There's so much of it, especially right now during the pandemic. There's so much group polarization and mob mentality. And it's just, it's crazy. Um, so I wanted to do a story about that because that's kind of what inspired me was, you know what, how are we going to combat this and like all this group polarization, gossiping, and stuff like that to our youth because they're our future. We should start now, be helping them recognize that, you know, this is the dangers, especially with all the social media. There's so much social media and it's how we communicate now. It's become a part of our communication, but it also has created a lot of group polarization and less open mindedness, right? So,
absolutely, absolutely. Stephanie, how do you hope your books will inspire future generations, both young and old?
well, I hope it impacts them and makes them feel inspired or makes them want to change something, whatever is in their life that's bringing them down. I hope it opens their eyes to the possibilities. That's really, really what I want. You know, I want anything I write, I really want it to inspire people. I want to impact their hearts. Um, that's that's what I'm going for. That's what fuels me, you know. Um, that is the biggest reward for me. Um, so that's what I'm hoping is that people will take an adventure by reading some of my works and seeing like I want them to recognize things. I want it to inspire people to do good.
Well, I really, really believe that that is possible. I think you're doing a fantastic job. And congratulations again on that book. Why don't you just hold that cover up again one more time before we say goodbye? Because it's really such a beautiful, beautiful um, cover, Land of the Dragon. So if you're watching the show and you haven't yet gone to get a copy of that book, it's available on Amazon. Please go and grab a copy of this book with that very beautiful cover. And so I really want to say thank you, Steffanie, for joining us on Books with Bridgetti.
Yeah,
It's
thank you for
been
having me.
it's been such a pleasure chatting to you and finding out more about your journey. And I hope that this interview has also inspired someone watching with dyslexia or somebody that they know with dyslexia that it is possible to become an author. So, don't let that hold you back from reaching your potential. Bianca, thank you so much for your kind words and thank you for joining us live on the show. Really appreciate that. And so, for our audience, if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss any future interviews with amazing authors like Steffanie Costigan. And so, until next time, keep reading, stay inspired, and remember every great story begins with a dream.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach call bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.